Hello. We're back for 4.3 lesson. This lesson is about the slope formula. So we're going to have some kind of less visual questions. And for those of you who love formulas, like just plugging in numbers and doing the math, this might be a really fun lesson for you. For those of you who struggle with that, you might have to pick up the pace, work a little harder. So let's explain what is the slope formula and why is it helpful. So the slope formula is helpful because sometimes you're not going to be able to use rise over run. You're not going to be able to make a slope triangle. So for example, let's take a look at this picture we have here. The picture shows that the triangle is very, very large. We're going between in the run direction and the x direction, we're going from 30 all the way to 45, and then in the other direction, in the y direction, the rise direction, we're going from 15 all the way up to 45. Oh, I think I misspoke. We were going from 30 to 50 here, and then from 15 to 45 here. Okay, so I could, right, go through and use my strategy here where I'm going to count every single box. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Not practical. Really, really not practical to spend that much time to find the slope. So what we can do instead is we can think to ourselves, well, if we're going between 30 and 50 down here in the run, in the x, so we're starting at 30 and we're going to 50, what we did was we went a total of 20. And what your brain did there is it subtracted. So the run part and the rise part, it's the same. But we would say we have two x values, right? We have our 30 and our 50. And so what we could do instead of counting is 50 minus 30. And when we're talking about that, we're saying 30 is the first x, that's why we call it x1, and 50 is the second x value. And so in our formula, we say x2 minus x1. So here in the run, our formula is to find the second x value from the second point, subtract the first x value from the first point. That'll tell you what your run is without you having to count out every single box. So the same thing applies if we were looking in the other direction. So goodbye, x's. We're going to talk to the y's now. So down here, we can see that 15 is where we're at here, right? Between here and here is 15. And we're going up to 45. So what we're actually doing is we're going up 30. 15 plus 30 is 45. So what we did in our head was we took the second number and we subtracted the first number in order to figure out that this was 30 units high, 30 boxes high. And so what we did is we took the second y value and we subtracted the first y value. So that's what we're going to do here. We have the second y value and we're going to subtract the first y value. And so our slope formula becomes y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So pretty simple idea here. It's just using subtraction instead of having to count out all of the numbers. Just to make it extra clear, our first point and our second point, it really doesn't matter which one you make which as long as you're consistent. But usually we say the first point is the one that is more to the left. So that would contain your y1 and your y2, or sorry, your x1 and your y1. And then the one that's more to the right, we usually call the second point. So that would contain your x2 and your y2. It's a pretty simple idea, but once we start dealing with some nasty little negatives and stuff, it gets a little annoying. So let's do a few examples where we don't have a visual to help us. We're just looking at the numbers alone. Here's what we want to do. We want to mark on the point where is our x1 and our x2. x1, x2, and then where is our y1 and our y2. Something that can be very helpful. There's lots of strategies that are helpful in these problems here. We can highlight the x's in one color and highlight the y's in another color. And what this helps us to do is we can then connect the x's on the bottom, because the x's are on the run, they're the bottom of the formula, and we can connect the y's on the top. That reminds us that we're going to be doing x2 minus x1 on the bottom of our fraction, and y2 minus y1 on the top of our fraction. So our slope is equal to y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. And so what we're going to do is just plug in the numbers. So remember, this is the second point and this is our first point. So we have 5 minus 3, and that's highlighted in orange there. And then the green is highlighted. We have 18 minus 12. So the second x value minus the first x value. I'm going to do it by hand first. And then for those of you who might need a little extra help with the subtraction, the division, and all that, I'll show you how to do it on the calculator as well. I'm very much a calculator person. You guys know that about me. So 5 minus 3 is 2. 18 minus 12 is 6. Both 2 and 6 are even numbers, so we can reduce the fraction to 1/3. Don't worry if that was kind of too much for you. What you can do is right when you figure out what numbers are getting plugged in, you can press the fraction button and you can just put in the whole thing as you see it. Press the equal sign and then press the button that, and I can't really move my face out of the way here. Maybe I can. Ooh, I think that worked. Press the button that is next to the equal sign that turns it into a fraction. Okay, so then we got 1/3, which is our final answer. Okay, so I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to use that same strategy. I'm going to highlight my x's in green, so the first part of the point is in green. I'm going to highlight my y's in orange. And then instead of writing out the whole formula, because I think sometimes the formula can be a little confusing, I'm just going to pre-highlight orange on top, green on the bottom. That reminds me which one goes where. And then I'm going to connect my x's with an arrow. So 5 minus 1 goes on the bottom. I remind myself this is on the top, so it's 8 minus 20 on the top. Now 8 minus 20 is negative 12. 5 minus 1 is positive 4. And we know that would be negative 3 because 12 divided by 4 is 3. Now again, if that's not something that you're real comfortable with, feel free. You can use your calculator. Just put it in all at the beginning and it'll give you out that answer. All right, you guys, the next 2 are for you to try. So good luck and have fun on that. And then we'll get into some more complicated negatives on the next round. All right, I hope that left you feeling successful. We're going to move on and do some more complicated examples that have negatives in them. And your password for this week's assignment is Banneker. So last lesson was Benjamin. And so the reason why I picked that is because there is a famous mathematician, Benjamin Banneker, and he was a really amazing person that helped build Washington, D.C. So I would encourage you to look into the history of Benjamin Banneker. He's a very inspirational person. So let's go, as soon as I stop clicking around here, and do these tricky questions. We're going to use the same strategy as we did before with the highlighting, but I'm going to push it a little bit to make sure that you understand something about the negatives. So again, going to highlight the X's in green, going to highlight the Y's in yellow, and then just to remind ourselves, we know that the Y's go on top and the X's go on the bottom, which can be kind of hard to remember which one goes on top and which one goes on the bottom. And then to help us not make mistakes with negatives, I'm going to add to this strategy. I'm going to put a negative there before I get started, because I know what I need to do is I need to subtract the Y's. And I know what I need to do is I need to subtract the X's. But it can be very complicated to try to keep track of where you're going to put your negatives. So let's start with the Y's. We have -10 is our first number, is our Y2, and because this is the second point, right? And this one is the first one. And so -10 goes there. And then our second number is 5. And so 5 goes over there. So the negative is just there. Putting the negative in before you start the problem, the minus sign, is just helpful and will help you from making negative errors. So then on our next one, or on our X's, we have 1 is our X2. So you put that first. Then there's a subtract, and then notice that the next number is a -3. So you need to put a -3, so it's -3. So sometimes you'll see that you put the second number in parentheses. You can put any of these numbers that you want to in parentheses. It does not change the answer, and actually can help prevent making mistakes, but I know sometimes those parentheses can get a little much, so I'm just going to do it like this. All right, so let's go through. -10 minus 5 is -15. 1 minus -3 is the same thing as 1 plus 3, so that would be a 4. Now that number cannot be reduced any further. Kind of a pinkies up, polite, bougie thing to do in math right here is to rewrite it with the negative in front instead of the negative on top, which I did not do very well. But, you know, it's not going to be marked wrong if you keep the negative on top with a 15. When you put your answers into Schoology, make sure this one, for example, would be -15 over 4. You always want to have the negative in front. So if that was a little much for you, like the negatives, the positives, all that stuff, you know, that's something that you're not really comfortable with, you can always check your answer or just put it all in exactly how you had it written at first, and then convert using the conversion button next to the equal sign. Okay, let's go. One more. So again, X is in green, that goes on the bottom. My Y's are in orange, that's going to go on the top. I put my negative there before I start to help me from making mistakes. And then something that actually might be helpful is to just do the two problems separately. So I'm going to do my Y's first. So 40 minus -20. So my first number is 40. And then it's subtract. And then that number is -20. So you need to make sure you write both negatives. It's a subtract from the formula and then a negative from the 20 in the point. All right. And then 2 minus, and then that second number is a -8. So got to make sure that we get that negative written down. All right, and so this is going to be 60 over 10, which is equal to 6. Again, feel free to do that on your calculator. If you're not feeling super comfortable doing all that goofy math, you can always have your calculator help you out. Calculators are mathematician's best friend. All right, good luck. Have fun with your last two questions.